My name is Rodney Badger Ford, and it's a tradition of my family that we are named after ancestors that have gone before us. And I am named for my great-great-great-grandfather, Rodney Badger, who was a pioneer, came across with the first company that came into the valley. But what was remarkable about that was when he came into the valley in July of 47, he rested for a couple of days, got back on his horse, and went back to winter quarters and brought his family out, and didn't come back with his family until October. So he was one of the few that made 2 trips the first year. But he was also a hero in that Brigham Young asked him to help some migrants across the Weber River, and he went on that assignment. And there were people from California, weren't Mormons. They were on their way to California, and there was a family, a man and his wife and 4 children. He advised them to unload the wagon, and especially his family, and be safe, and move the wagon across, and then they would get the family across by horseback and more safer means. But the man says,
well, this is because the river was so full and rushing.
In the spring of the year.
Oh, it was in the fall. Oh, maybe it was the
spring of the year.
Okay.
And he, when the wagon went into the water, the bed of the wagon lifted off the wheels, and the father jumped to the tongue of the wagon and went across safely, but his family started floating down the river. And my grandfather jumped into the water and saved 2 of the children and the mother, and he went back in for the other 2 children and didn't make it. He was a hero. He was someone that I have looked up to because of my name is like his name.
Well, the reason Rodney was asked to do this, of course, is because he was the first sheriff for that.
The deputy sheriff of Salt Lake.
Yeah, so that's
Brigham Young asked him to go up there. So he's in the monument at the state capitol as being the first law enforcement to give his life in the line of duty.
There's been a lot of Rodney Badger since then.
And there's even a Rodney Paul Hovey that we're pretty proud of.
It's a great name. It's interesting, when I first heard that name, Rodney, it was like electric in my mind. This is when I was young, before I even knew this guy. I thought, oh, that is such a classy name. And then when I found out that I could actually meet somebody named that, I was like, ooh. So that was good.
I was born in Centerville, which is actually north of Centerville, in between Centerville and Farmington. Right on Main Street was where my home was. We have 8 kids, 4 boys and 4 girls as children. My father is Hugh John Ford, and my mother is Rosalia Badger Ford. And my oldest 2 siblings were born in the hospital in Salt Lake. My next 2 sisters and myself and my brother were born at home, and my 2 younger siblings, Blaine and Carol, were born back in a hospital. But I've always been interested to tell people I've never been a patient in a hospital, not even to be born. And I can generally win the trivia game by saying I've never been a patient in a hospital.
Do you want to tell one about the sewing machine?
Oh, I guess. This is probably one to cut, but it's got to be told. The doctor was one that would travel, and he would come back and treat us as kids, as a family. But it was time to be circumcised. And I was circumcised on the sewing machine, and I was told that. And every time I looked at my mother when she was using the old sewing machine with the treadle, I wondered how in the world a doctor ever did that.
Well, let's see. I was born in Salt Lake City. My mother did go to the hospital. She was there 5 days. I can hardly imagine being in the hospital 5 days these days. My mother, she was a classic act. And my dad, and he always called her my beautiful brown eyes. So we always had this big deal in our family about which of the kids were going to have brown eyes. You know, they could see better. So half of them did end up being able to see better. Bountiful was a quiet little suburb of Salt Lake City. Fourth East, where I lived, was like the edge of town. And now it's almost downtown. It was a beautiful place to grow up. We could play kick the can on the street at night, and nobody would ever bother us. And, you know, just everything was safe and fun. Lots of cousins that lived by me, so we were very close. And Grandma lived next door, so Kate and Fred Zezeker. So we were really close. She would bake bread for us and do all those good things that bind families together. She worked really hard to help Grandpa with the farm. He was somewhat disabled by the strokes that he'd had, and she was always very protective of him in their later years. But it was a close neighborhood. It was a great place to live.
And now it's a park.
Yeah. Now there's a restroom sitting where my house was.
Oh, appropriate.
Actually, Grandma's house was one of the first brick houses in Bountiful, if you can believe that. It was like 1871 or something like that it was built. So a lot of history there.
It's still there.
Yeah.
When I grew up, we lived on a farm, and there was cherry orchards on 3 sides of our house. And so that was my early recollection, is living in a cherry orchard. Beyond the cherry orchard was a peach orchard, and beyond the peach orchard was an apricot orchard. And we would, and then beyond that was the foothills of Centerville. And so we would have a wonderful place to grow up. The barn was probably 100 yards to the north, and we had cattle, and we milked cows. I started milking a cow when I was 8 years old, and milked cows until I was 15 years of age. We had fields below the Union Pacific Railroad now, below where Trax is now, and we would drive the cows morning and night to the pasture and home from the pasture up Chase Lane. And So our life on the farm was centered around a lot of chores. We had chores in the morning and we had chores at night, and a great place to play during the daytime. As I grew older, the trees began to die, and as the trees died, the cherry orchard became a place for gardens, garden crops, which we sold on the market. And a truck would come and pick up the produce that we would grow in the evenings. And so I got to know a little bit about that. But growing up, my father had a hard time making a living on the farm that was in transition. And so he got a job to work at Hillfield as a civilian employee. He would put airplane windshields in the airplanes that were stationed there at Hillfield. And my grandfather, who stayed on the farm, became my mentor, taught me how to work, and made sure I was doing my chores and doing the things that I should. But I had a great relationship with my grandfather. And of course, my mother was always there for us. And she would make homemade bread. She would, we would take a grain that we would grow, and we would take it to Bountiful on I would drive the tractor, and my grandfather would ride on the back of the wagon, and it would have sacks of grain, and we would trade it for flour and sugar. When we would come back to the house, we would unload the flour and sugar on a big table in our basement. And I remember the table had cans, so the mice, if there were any mice in the house, they couldn't climb up the slick can, go down into and get up the leg of the table. And so that was protected from the mice. My mother would put up fruit. She'd bottle vegetables, beans, beets, and all kinds of fruit, cherries and peaches and apricots and plums and pears, in 2-quart bottles. And it was not rare for us to get a 2-quart bottle of fruit and homemade bread and butter, and that would be our supper. My oldest sister is 10 years older than I, and so I remember her being an older sibling and left the house pretty soon. But my younger brother, Holland, and I were pals. We did our chores together, and that was a good growing up experience to be with a brother just 2 years younger than I. My 2 older sisters, Margaret and Hilda, they had housework to do. We had chores to do. By the time Carol and Blaine came, we had pretty much ended the farming business, and they were raised altogether different than we were. We had horses. I learned to drive horses and to ride horses. I remember the 2 horses that were called work horses. Their names were Kit and Belle, and they were used on the farm as the work animals that they were meant to be. But it was a good place and time to grow up as a kid.
Well, that was a pretty long story.
Sorry.
Okay, let me think about how my growing up was really quick here. My dad he owned a produce business in Salt Lake. I don't know, all these produce that these Fords sent to Salt Lake to the produce market probably ended up at A&Z. My dad was the Z, and his partner was the A. So A&Z became a very prosperous business, but he worked very hard. He would have to go to work like 3 or 4 in the morning so that all the trucks could be loaded so they could deliver to the grocery stores all the produce that they either had shipped in from California or Nevada or from local farms. So it was a connection there with the farm life that was like, I don't think I want to go there. I'm not marrying a farmer. But what did I end up doing?
Marrying a farmer. Still did. Still married to him.
Yep. And my mother, she left Fillmore as soon as she graduated from high school. She wanted out of there. It was a dead-end place. But she had met my dad at a high school dance when he came through on his truck one snowy night. And they got stuck in Fillmore. And she caught his eye. And the rest is history. If my dad was anything, he was honest. And he took great pride in that in his business, that he never cheated anybody. And on the market, you dealt with a lot of kinds of people. There were a lot of immigrants and whatever, different backgrounds. But he was very proud of his rating in the Blue Book. So anyway, one time we were on a trip. I imagine we just went down to Fillmore, which we occasionally did. We didn't take very many trips, but we had stopped at a drugstore, I think it was, for something to drink. And my dad negotiated the transaction, and the waitress had given him too much money back. You know, I was just a little kid. I wasn't paying too much attention, but it really impressed me that he stopped her and said, "Are you sure that's right?" And she said, "Yeah." Well, he was such a whiz at counting money, adding up the figures from the market, whatever. It was really easy for him to see that she had miscalculated. And the fact that he corrected her and made that right was very impressive to this little girl. So that was something that really stuck in my mind. Now, as far as something a little bit later, my folks they were members of the church, but we didn't ever go to church, per se. But when it came time to get married, and we wanted to be married in the temple, and my folks weren't qualified to do that, Dad wanted to know, what did I want as a gift? And I said, "I want you to be in the temple with us." I'm sorry. So he prepared himself so that he could be there. And that meant a great deal to me, that he would turn his life around after 25 years and do something that I really wanted. To have him there for that important part of my life. So, anyway, that's good.
Excellent.
Well, my grandpa, he was actually born in Switzerland, so he came as a young boy to this country. But he had a streak of joker in him, I guess it was. He loved to pull little pranks. And he had a jar that he kept in the pantry, and it was kind of dark in the pantry. You know, there were no windows in it. But he had a little jar. It was a little jam jar. But what we didn't know as little kids was it wasn't filled with jam. And he would love to take us in there and ask us to open that up and get some jam for, whatever. Anyway, you take the lid off and there's this thing, spring, with a funny little head on it that would jump out of the jar. Oh my gosh, that scared me to death. My grandpa scared me because of that. After that, it was like, I can't trust him. But he was a great dad, and his father, Gottlieb, I can't wait to meet that man. He sent money and one of his friends back to Switzerland to research the Zezeker line in Switzerland. And it's because of him and the contributions that he made that we've been able to do thousands of names to do their temple work. So he's my hero too. My grandpa was, of course, he was part of that.
Working with my grandfather, he seemed like an old man to me because I was so young. But he was very strong. He would shoe the horses. We would raise our beef. I remember him telling me to go get a rope around the calf that we were going to prepare for our meat, and I would lead it over to where he was, and he would take a big hammer and knock it unconscious, and that was quite a thing for me as a young person to hold the animal that's just been killed. But that's what it was in those days. We would have chicken a lot of times for our Sunday meal, and I would be sent out to get a chicken. But I remember my grandfather telling me a few things. He said, "You're a man if you can stand in a wash tub." Back in those days, a lot of times we would bathe in a bath in a metal tub. So this metal tub, if you could stand in the tub and lift 100 pounds of weight over your head, then you're a man. And I couldn't do it. And then when I showed him I couldn't do it, he says, "Well, it's okay. You'll be a man before your mother." So it gave me hope. We have the same story because when we met each other. But I never knew. I was a senior and Grandma was a sophomore. And all the time that I was in high school, I didn't know her. I didn't, our paths didn't cross. But my brother Holland was her age, and so they were in that same circle. But I graduated from high school, and Grandma's younger sister Barbara was a friend of my friend, and we were driving through Bountiful, and Steve Smith said, "I'd like to go by Barbara's house," which we did. We drove by, and we were driving in my father's pickup truck, which was a story in itself, but had spotlights, and it was green, and it was beautiful 1948 GMC. And we drove by, and there was Marcia out on the back lawn with sunbathing. Back in the days when it was always cool to be a little tan after the summer. It's not cool anymore. But she was in her bathing suit, and when we stopped, she ran in the house, and we thought that, well, she was modest. She was going in to get a cover-up, but actually she ran in to get bananas so that she could offer us so we'd stay a long time. And
he prevaricates.
That was the first time we met. But just to eat a banana wasn't good enough. When I went home, I told my sister, my younger sister, now this is going down 4 years, Carol, that I would really like to date Marcia. And Carol says, well, what would you like to do? And I said, how about a movie? But I don't want to call her. That'd be too much. That'd be too bold. Carol says, well, I'll ask her. So she called up and got a date for me to go to Tammy and the Bachelor. If you want a really good movie that will change your life, go see that movie with Debbie Reynolds, which you probably know she died before you were born. But it was a wonderful experience. But this was 10 days before I was going on active duty into the Coast Guard. And for 10 days we dated as often as we could. And to a point where when I left to go into the service, Grandma said that she would write to me, which she did for the 6 months that I was gone. I went out on a cruise and for 30 days as part of my active duty. And when I got back, there were 30 letters for me to read.
Are you kidding? That was a great bonfire.
I remember one letter that I sent to her. It was a little bit later, but I didn't have any paper, I didn't have an envelope. And so it was just a piece of paper big enough to put a stamp on one side and her address. And I wrote a little note on the back, and I gave her a poem. And the poem was, bad pen, no ink, can't think, amen.
Here comes this little square paper like this with a stamp on it. I was like, I can't believe it. That'd never fly today. No.
When I got back, I went back to work in Washington on a farm with my brother. And so we continued our writing. I got back in December and started back on the farm in February. So I went back up there for a year, and Grandma was a junior then. No, you were a senior then. I can't remember. Anyway,
I was too young.
I was too young. But while I was working up there, I got enough money together to get a ring. And next Christmas, I gave her a ring and she accepted it. And I remember her dad, he just was so happy to have me, but he told her, give it back. So,
but I didn't.
She didn't. She kept it. She disobeyed her dad for the first time in her life and the last time. Thank goodness, right?
Well, I remember when you gave me that ring, I was like, wait a minute, I have plans. I got to go to college. I've got to do this and this. And you said, you can still do that. And every argument that I could come up with, you were able to dissuade me. We could surely get married and it would just be fine. And we would live happily ever after. And it was a life full of jokes, always.
Yeah, we were married in Salt Lake. Back in those days, there was quite a choice. You could get married in Salt Lake or St. George or
Logan.
So we chose Salt Lake, but it was an experience that has been a lot to me because not have been to the temple before, either one of us. We were endowed and we were married at the same time. And I remember my grandfather being there and my mother and father, of course.
What I remember about the wedding day mostly was we had the wedding breakfast at was it the Lion House or the Beehive House? I think it was at the Lion House.
Or hotel at Temple Square.
No,
Anyway.
No. But my grandma came up from Fillmore to be there for that, and I thought
It was special.
that was special. And it was a beautiful day. I mean, February 12th, winter, I remember the sun shining. And it was like, this is the beginning of a beautiful life together. And the next morning we woke up and it had snowed. So we timed it beautifully.
It's been bad weather ever since. One of the things that President Christiansen gave us as an admonition was that he said, go to the temple once a month. And he said, matter of fact, when you come to the temple next month, write a note and slip it under my door, which we did, and that has been a real blessing to us to be able to go to the temple and receive the blessings that he promised us. Of course, everything that's anything to us would have to be our family. And I remember being so in love, kneeling at the altar of the temple, thinking, it will never be better than this, and never will I be happier than this. And I remember what I thought, that I was so in love. But I knew nothing about it. Love isn't that. Even though it was perceived at that time to be the everything, if I would have only known how much more could be added to that day and that experience throughout the years, I would think that experience was really nothing compared to the feelings that I have now. We've been able to be in the temple many times together. Many times, even on missions together, and worked together and have been in there on a regular basis so much. And now I realize that what I knew then was only a belief. So I'm smart enough to know now that what I know now as my love for Grandma is only a belief, because it will be ultimately that much more.
Wow, well said. I can only say amen. Do you really want to go into all of this?
Start out, I have.
We have 9 children. We started with Margot, and she was a surprise, a very happy surprise. I've told her this. What a blessing she's been in our life. She is absolutely
Guileless.
Yep, that's what Grandma used to say.
Without guile.
Grandma used to say that about her. She's super talented, super compassionate, super everything. She's everything I ever wanted to be. Then we had Cheryl Ann, and that was the beginning of our troubles because she had patent ductus. She'd had surgery when she was just a year old on her heart. We had to go to Spokane to have that done.
Open heart surgery, opened her up and clear open.
Yeah, that was pretty hard to see her go through that, sitting in that crib in the hospital with tethers all over her.
And probably one of the darkest moments of my life was Grandpa Z was up from Bountiful, and we were all in the waiting room waiting for the doctor to come in. Didn't know how the operation went or anything. And talk about doctor's bedside manners. He came in and he had blood on his clothes, and we were in the waiting room. He says, "Come in to this room." And we thought, "Oh, this is not good." He put his hands on his chin and was down. He didn't even, we were all around and we were pretty much out of it. And then he looked up and saw us and he says, "Oh, it went well." Everything went well. And I don't know if I held Grandpa Z back or he held me back, but that's not the way to tell people. I got in the car that night and had to go back to the farm because everything was so well. And then Grandma was there, left with Cheryl Ann for a week or so in recovery back in those days. And the second day she got infection, and it was she wanted to get out of her crib. She was 1 year old. They had to wait for her heart to get big enough to make the operation, so we had a year of, they said, "Don't let her get a cold, don't let her get sick," because she has this heart condition, and it could be fatal. So we really took care of her for a year. And then she had the operation and got so sick, and I was gone, and Grandma had to take care of all that. Looking through the window and seeing Cheryl Ann with restraints, holding her back, just struggling and struggling, trying to get out. Back in the barbaric days. Now they do that operation without even open heart. They go in and close that valve without. And they can do it even before they're born. It's amazing. Cheryl Ann is, she has been a little bit behind because of her illness when she was a baby, but she was right along with Margot in growing up.
Yeah.
And then who was after Cheryl Ann?
That was RJ.
RJ, how about that?
We started to feel like we were being targeted because he was just 7 months old when he passed. That was a condition of sudden infant death. It happened on Thanksgiving weekend when my folks were there with us. And that was a trial, a really serious time in our lives. And why don't you tell about that part of it?
I had been called to the Elders Quorum presidency. I was the first counselor, just being young, in my early 20s. And Bud Sanford was the other counselor, and the president was Leo Otley. And Leo Otley was out in his field on his tractor. His tractor went into a washout of the sprinkler, and he was tossed off the tractor and lit underneath the wheel of his tractor. And his wife saw the tractor tipped up like that, and she got in her station wagon, went out, and got him in the station wagon and went 35 miles to Wenatchee to the hospital. And she left word to call Bud Sanford and I to come and give him a blessing. By the time we got to Wenatchee, and I being so young and not have had that situation before, I gave the blessing. And Bud Sanford was an older guy, but he had been inactive, and he was called to that position just to activate him, I think. But when we went in and saw him there, all wrapped up and bruised the way he was, and couldn't speak, he was groaning, we didn't know what blessing to give him. But we did, gave him a blessing. I can't tell you what I said, but I know how I felt. After I give him the blessing, he thanked us. He spoke to us. Now, he wasn't miraculously healed and walk out with us. He went through a long recovery, but he recovered. And all the time, just as a side note, all the time that he was recovering, I became the Elders Quorum president. They didn't release him. They let us struggle on. But getting back to RJ, when we found RJ, here he was, a perfect little baby body. And I gave him a similar blessing. And I don't know what I said. I'm sure it was very similar to what I said when I gave the blessing to Leo. But I know how I felt. I knew that it was the words that I said were not going to happen. I knew that he was gone. And I remember coming back from the hospital, and Grandma said, "Where's the baby?" And we were pretty well shook up from it. And started through a very hard time, but it was Thanksgiving, and my Uncle Ward Holbrook was up visiting some relatives up there. And he was a stake president in Bountiful here, but he was up visiting our relatives. And he came by and visited with us, and he said that he would like to give Grandma a blessing. And he gave her a blessing that she would find peace. And a feeling came over us. It's hard to say this, but we felt that peace, and it was sweeter than anything we had felt before. It's the Comforter. That experience has really directed our lives. We've had other incidents, and we've prayed for a miracle. But more than a miracle, we pray for that peace. It's sweet. It's assurance of eternity. And we went through the funeral and all, and I have to tell you this, that it hasn't been all. I've doubted myself. I said I had faith in the priesthood enough to heal Leo Watley, but I didn't have enough faith to heal my own son. I'd wake up in the night and feel that, and have to remind myself of the assurance that Heavenly Father gives to those who seek that peace. And like I said, it's directed our experiences many times throughout our life.
Yeah, that was...
He was our first son. His name was RJ, which is Rodney John, and named for myself and my brother John.
Or your father, or your grandfather.
John Ford, and John Ford.
And I remember us talking with our kids, our little girls, about where RJ had gone and what our temple marriage meant.
Yeah.
Cheryl then says, that means you got us forever. And that was wisdom out of the mouth of a babe. She knew. So anyway, the next one was Shauna, and our trials had not ended because she was just, I don't know whether she was 10 days old or maybe even before that. She started into a tachycardia. She was like gray, and her heart was going like 240 beats a minute or something, like some astronomical number for a baby, that she would survive something like that. And I thought, we are being targeted. What's going on? We, of course, were able to get her to the doctor, who prescribed some medication, and eventually we got it regulated, even though the doctor was a drunkard. And
I spent the night with her, and what happens is the medicine is called digitalis, and it's a medicine that regulates the heartbeat. And so he said that it will happen in steps. It will cut in half and cut in half and cut in half, and then she'll be normal, and then we'll know the right amount. And you give the right amount of digitalis for the weight of the baby. And so like Grandma said, he was drunk and he didn't calculate correctly, and I spent the whole night, and it didn't cut in half and cut in half and cut in half. And she was in the incubator, and I would, there with her, I could put my arms through the armholes. But in the morning when he came and he was sober, he recalculated and put her on the medicine, and it did just exactly what she said. We took her home, and we were supposed to give her this exact amount of digitalis every
I don't remember how
2 times a day or whatever it was. And you know what babies do with yucky medicine? They throw it up. And we'd even hurry and give her something to eat afterwards, and she'd throw it all up. And so we didn't know whether giving her too much or not enough, and we would for a year listen at the door. Oh, I can't hear her breathe.
Oh my.
But, you know, Shauna, she's no worse for the wear. She's good.
Okay, then.
Michael,
Oh, were we happy to have a boy?
don't worry. Yep.
He was only 17 months old before he took his first step. I don't know what took him so long. Once he got on his feet, he didn't ever quit, though. He was brave beyond his abilities. When it came to football, he wanted to be in there. We're not talking about tragedies, but that guy has had his troubles.
Yeah.
Riding down 9th North on his bicycle in the wintertime
In the rainstorm.
was snow.
It was white rain.
It was cold.
It was almost. But it was slick anyway, and the brakes got wet, and he was going down, didn't make the corner, and he took out the chain link fence. Tried anyway. But Michael has unbelievable ability to accept pain. He broke his back, and they tied him to a board in the hospital, and so that he couldn't move. And they said that a physical therapist that knew what he was doing would move him enough to keep his circulation going and all. And so with that, I left the hospital in the morning and went to work. And when I came back that evening, the physical therapist had not been there. And Michael was, tears were in his eyes, but he wasn't complaining much. But I rolled him up on his side, just rolled him up on the board on his side. And he had been in such excruciating pain all day long and never mentioned it to anyone waiting for that physical therapist. With that came a backache for a long time, and he would play, he wanted to play football, which he did in rifle, and he was voted the spiritual leader of the team. And we would watch him, and Grandpa Z was there with us, and he would go in and make a tackle, and he would come limping back to the huddle. You could tell he was in severe pain, but by the time it was time to go for another, he was ready to go back in and give it all. He was a very good student. He went to study abroad in England, where he met Melissa, and that's been a very good thing. Got his law degree at George Washington University, and I'm so proud of Mike.
Then Janice came along and we hardly recognized her because she had so much hair. She was like so different. Everybody else came bald. She was such a pretty baby. I just love to show her off. She's been a real joy. We named her Janice Joan because Joan, who was John's wife and lived next door, was just like my dearest friend. And and Janice has been such a blessing to us in so many ways. She's just so solid. She waited a long time to find the right guy to marry, but when she did, they were happily on their way to a very solid marriage, which has brought us a great deal of joy as we've watched those children grow and develop and carry on the same values that their parents had taught them. And then came another boy. Really grateful for Brian. He's probably the most like Shauna of anybody, I guess. He can sell anybody anything, and that's what he excels at.
Kind of like refrigerators to Eskimos.
He's a great salesman. He knows how to put it together to make it appealing. He served a mission in Chicago, which was very successful for him. You didn't mention Michael's mission, by the way. And we didn't mention Janice's mission. Anyway, we had 3 missionaries in a row, which we just really appreciated. So anyway, Brian, he managed to get through without playing too much football. He was big enough to play football, but he didn't enjoy it nearly as much as Michael did.
And Mike would say, if I had Brian's body, I would...
if I had Brian's body and my ambition.
or something like that.
They could have been.
Yeah, put them both together, they had been really a football player.
We have to mention this one thing. My dad, he knew the coach at the University of Utah. And this is when Michael was probably maybe a year old or something like that. My dad told the coach, hey, I've got this really, really great football player. He's in Washington. It's my daughter's son. So why don't you give him a call and see if you can recruit him? Somebody calls for my son, Michael. He's hardly able to walk, let alone talk. Wouldn't you like to come and play football at the University of Utah? Well, I think he's going to be about 19 years away from that. My dad was a joker too. That was fun.
Then Carol.
Carol had long, blonde, curly hair. She was so cute. And I loved dressing her up. The problem is Carol she thinks in a different way than I do. She likes not to be in the spotlight. Don't wear any flashy colors. Don't step out and make something for yourself. Just let me be in the background. She is absolutely talented and has everything to offer, but she is very retiring.
Carol wouldn't remember, but when she was a tiny baby, she was a mess. She cried all the time, and she was just, we couldn't console her. She was, so we took her and see if there was something they could find out was the matter with her, and she had ear problems. She got the little tubes in her ears, and she became the sweetest little baby we ever had because we had already experienced the bitter. She became the sweetest.
She was about 6 weeks old, I think, when I took her with me and Grammy to Olympia to meet the governor because Grammy had been named the Washington Mother of the Year. And Carol got to meet the governor of Washington. She didn't know it at the time. She probably would have squealed then. But it was right after that when she started acting up. But she was nice for the governor.
Good.
She's so talented and very thoughtful and very giving. And I know she was a little worried at first about her choice when Gilbert asked for her hand, whether that was going to be acceptable to us. And what a perfect match. I'm telling you, they are both so well suited, and the children that they're raising are awesome, just awesome.
Katie was older. She was, like Grandma said, she was 13 years of age when she got was diagnosed with the disease, and they said, hurry her. It was on a Friday. She had double vision and went to the optometrist, and they said, hurry her to the children's hospital. There's something wrong there. And so they looked in her eyes, and they could see the optic nerve had been bulged. They said, you got a tumor there that is pushing it out, making double vision. And so they said, and they started her through the tests, and they said, this is really aggressive. We're going to have to operate on Monday. And of course, we were devastated. They said, this is so aggressive. She only has about 6 months to live, but we'll make her as comfortable and as productive as we can. And so we were, like I said, devastated, but we were sitting in church in the hospital with Katie, and they sang the song, Abide With Me, 'Tis Eventide. At RJ's funeral, that was sung by Joan and Weston. During my dad's funeral, the singer that was supposed to sing the song changed, wasn't on the program. He sang Abide With Me, 'Tis Eventide. And here we were in the hospital hearing the words, Abide With Me. And the feeling of Heavenly Father telling us that all was well, and the peace that we received from that was remarkable to us. We feel like we feel very close to that song. I wouldn't mind if it was sung at my funeral. Nobody would know why they're singing that song, but I'll be cheering from the other side, I guess. But when they were going to perform the operation, the family all gathered. That was Friday when they determined that. And Sunday afternoon, Bishop Browning came to the hospital, and Katie had asked him if he would give her a blessing. Bishop Browning said, yeah, but I want to meet with you for a minute. So Katie and Grandma and I went into another room, and he says, I only have one question, Katie. He said, Katie, do you think that Jesus can heal you? Katie said, yes. He says, that's all I needed to know. And he went in and gave her a blessing that she would be healed. She had the operation. The cancer was not operable. And they were going to debulk it, but they couldn't do very much of that. They closed her back up and said that she had probably had the cancer from when she was young. They misdiagnosed it. It wasn't fast moving. It was something was slow, and that she would live. She lived 14 more years, and there was no reason to us to know that Katie needed to live for 14 years for her sake. She had done everything that she needed to do to go back to Heavenly Father as much as RJ. but we needed her. She was such a blessing to us that Heavenly Father blessed us with her for another 14 years. She had amazing experiences. Even she told us that the Savior had visited her, which we don't doubt for a minute.
Of course, she lost a lot of physical abilities. Those last 14 years were not happy years for her because she could see life was moving on without her. But the rest of us learned to help and to.
We had an experience with her patriarchal blessing. She was going to Handicap Mutual, and the kids were getting their patriarchal blessings, and Katie came and said, "I'd like a patriarchal blessing." So we said, "Why not?" So she went to the bishop and got a recommend for a patriarchal blessing. We got an appointment with President Godfrey. He was in the temple presidency with me. I knew him very well. But we met in his living room and talked for a minute, and he said, "I don't think I have a blessing for Katie." And we said, "Really?" We were disappointed. Katie was visibly disappointed. And we sat there for, it seemed like a long time in silence. And then he said, "I have a blessing for her." He gave her a blessing that I have never seen the likes of. He blessed her that she would live and that she would meet a young man. She would marry in the temple. She'd have children. I went through everything, and then it was over, and we left. And like I said, I was working with him in the temple, and I said, "What happened?" He said, "The Spirit spoke to me." He said, "Don't withhold any blessing." Pretty neat experience. Even though sometimes we don't think we have it all in this life, it's not over. We feel like we're going to be able to raise our kids in the millennium. And all those blessings that were promised Katie will come to fruition.
Well, from our 9 children, with 2 already ahead of us, our 7 children have presented us with 37 grandchildren, which we absolutely adore and have been such a blessing in our lives, and just are so proud of them and all the things they do to contribute.
And if we would have known how good it was to have grandkids, we would have had them instead of our kids.
That would be a possibility, huh? Oh, they truly have blessed us in so many ways, served us. We've got the youngest one. What are those kids? They're just 12 now, so the oldest one is 16?
Danny?
No,
Danny.
he's a great.
Oh, he's a grand.
I'm thinking of Max.
Oh.
Yeah, we're heading to the next generation already. Yeah.
But Shauna has had an experience that we shared with. She's had a girl, baby, that passed, and so they, we don't have a corner on all the experiences that have meant a lot to us. I know that has meant a lot to Shauna as with Rosalie and Tiankum. So it seems like each generation gets their little angel, as you might say, for our family anyway. But I don't think this is normal. I don't look around at families that have been blessed like we have, with situations that have strengthened our testimonies of the plan of happiness.
So those 37 grandchildren, we have 19 great-grandchildren, I think. I lose track.
And they're even better. Hate to say that, guys, but
our family
they're even
reunions are the very best, and we do have lots of pictures all over our house, which should express that families are central to everything we do. Everything is centered around that. I'm not sure that these things that I've participated in so much have changed my life. They're just a further expression. I was president of Utah Association of American Mothers, and eventually I became the national president of American Mothers Incorporated, which was an organization designed to strengthen homes and families spiritually. And that meant a great deal to me, that there was an outlet for me besides through the church where I could be a spokesman for strong families that were really connected, especially spiritually. And I served in that organization for 20 plus years, doing various things, among which was becoming a delegate to an international conference in Istanbul. It was a United Nations conference that was talking about sustainable families. And the whole gist of this conference from the United Nations standpoint was, we've got to limit families because resources are limited. We're going to run out of space, we're going to run out of water, we're going to run out of food. And there was absolutely no mention of religion as a way of giving people faith or hope. So it was an important event in my life to be able to spend 2 weeks over there trying to lobby with people and helping them to realize that there were other avenues, there were other answers to the problems that they felt like were absolutely limiting. And it was especially, the group that I was with, there were 37 of us. One of them was Dr. Richard Wilkins, who was a professor at BYU in law, and he became an absolute spokesman for our group as he stood before that huge congregation of antagonists and quoted from the Proclamation on the Family.
Which had just come out.
Yeah, this was like 1996 when we had the conference, and the proclamation came out in the fall of 1995. Absolutely out of nowhere, this proclamation came, or so it seemed. But I do not doubt for a minute but what the leadership of the church knew, that the family was going to come under attack in a very strong and pronounced way. And so he pronounced, Richard Wilkins did, in front of that congregation, some of the concepts that are outlined in the Proclamation on the Family.
Could I mention one thing? God is in the details. Richard Wilkins was growing a beard because he was Scrooge, and he was growing it big enough that he could use his own whiskers for the Scrooge person that he was going to portray. And
if they had recognized that he was part of our group, they probably would have found a way to eliminate him from the program. But he didn't look like a Latter-day Saint.
And the other detail is he didn't have a spot on the program, and there was a delegate from Africa that came by and said, "You're from America and you don't want to board everybody, and you're for families." And he said, "I have a spot that you can use my spot on the program." And it all went together. Prior to that, the delegation that went was given a blessing by
Richard Scott,
who
was an elder,
apostle. And when they got back, they reported back to him and President Packer what went on there, and it was a very, very productive time.
I can remember when the doctor gave me that report. I was standing out there on the deck. You were outside with somebody. I can't remember what you were even doing, but I said, "Well, the doctor called, and it's positive." Just like that. And then, it starts to sink in, and you start to think.
I just thought you were pregnant again.
That would have been scary. As the time goes on and it begins to sink in about what the reality of that is, I thought, you know what? I'm done. I'm plenty done with this life. I'm not going to go through all of that stuff. And I don't remember who it was that told me about Neil Maxwell and the struggles that he had with cancer, and how he just kept doing it and going it, and that we have reason to live as long as we can.
And I think it was his wife that said he had the same thing you said. "Well, if the Lord wants me, I'm ready to go." And his wife says, "No, you're following the wrong counsel," and she corrected him, which he took the counsel.
I don't know, your strength comes from somewhere. We went to Seattle for that surgery to a doctor that Ray recommended up there. And I recuperated at Cheryl Ann's, and she took care of me, and I came home and life just went on. I went to the National Convention for American Mothers where I was the president, and everybody was saying like, "Oh my gosh." I hadn't started chemo treatments at that point. That was a lot harder. But it's hard to see your own kids go through that kind of stuff. Margot went through it, and we've had several diagnoses of cancer in the family. Somehow, your faith carries you through those tough spots. There's that peace that comes just knowing that this isn't all there is.
Yeah, I want to just say that this experience has been on my mind for years on how to leave something for my children and children's children. And that is something that is hard to explain, because I've already expressed that probably the two people that besides my dear wife, that has influenced my life is my grandfather, John W. Ford, and my mother, Rosalia Badger Ford. They were a tremendous influence for me to have traits that I think are very, very valuable, such as honesty and integrity and such as that. However, I feel to speak about something else, and that is I have been, through experiences that I've had in my life, I've come to know certain things. And to illustrate that, just last week I was building on the deer fence on the grow box. And to hook the gate to the grow box, I wanted to put a large screw through into the grow box. And this large screw had a particular head on it that required a special bit. And I had 2 bits, I know. I purchased them just for this occasion. And I looked and spent a couple hours, I think, looking for these bits so that I could attach this. I got these bits from Home Depot. I knew that Ace Hardware did not have them. So I said, okay, I'm going to go buy some more. They're kind of costly, but I was going to go buy some more bits, and because I wanted to secure that evening that I was doing it. And so as I got in the car, I went by Ace Hardware, and I said, I'm just going to go in and look at their bolts. And I went in there and I picked up a bolt, and it was much shorter, but it was one that it was thicker, and I thought this might work. And so I came back, and sure enough, this thicker, shorter bolt with more threads fit perfectly. If I would have had the bit and to go into the log, it would have been too long, and the screw part of it would have passed through and it would have failed. And I thought, this is an answer to prayer. Here I've got my attachment, and if I would have found the bits that I prayed for, I would have, it would have failed. And don't get me wrong, I was very grateful that I got to fasten the fence to the grow box. But that wasn't the miracle. The miracle was the sweet spirit that came to me, that God was there for me. He answered the prayer. A lot of people, maybe my kids, would say, oh, the miracle was attaching the gate to the box. The miracle is in our lives every day, but the feeling that came over me that God is there and listening and answers was a comfort to me that I appreciate more. And relating it back to the experiences that I've had, I have received very many what we call tender mercies or miracles in our lives, and we think that's the miracle. But the real miracle is that sweet spirit that comes through, and the after thinking of how grateful we are for that spirit. And saying all of that, I thought that there would be a way that I might express myself through the pamphlet, a parable on the bucket. And I saw that produced, and I had that great feeling to myself, and I was in hopes that the family and those that would read it would also feel that spirit. And I've frankly been a little disappointed that no one has expressed that, oh, they've been saying, oh, that was great, that was fun, that was like attaching the gate to the box experience for me. But they didn't realize that the spirit of that pamphlet was what I was hoping for.
The thing that I remember is our family reunion in 2016. We had as our theme the living Christ. And I challenged our posterity to memorize it, and anybody who did, we'd give them $100. We didn't have too many takers, but the feeling, again, during that whole conference, that whole reunion, was so sweet and tender to me. Everything we did was centered on the unity, the spirit of cooperation and love that we felt. We've had a lot of reunions, but that one was especially sweet to me, to be surrounded by our posterity who were sharing the very most important things in life, which was our relationship, our eternal relationships. And I just, it's like splendor in the grass. You can't go back and capture that again. But that was perhaps the sweetest moment that I can remember. And I had hoped that everybody that was there was feeling, like you said, the same thing that I was feeling as we were singing the song that my great-grandfather wrote, the music to Oh My Father. I was just crying because I was so happy. It was a beautiful experience. The whole thing was amazing, and if I could put that moment or those moments in a bottle and pull them out and smell them and look at them and enjoy them again, that would be the one I would choose.
Could we just, in a minute, express the reunion we had last year with our children and their spouses? I, for one, felt that spirit there. We talked about what we did there, but it was just togetherness. It wasn't anything like going on a cruise, or which we contemplated, or going someplace grand and enjoying each other. And I'm sure we would have done just that. We would have enjoyed a spectacular vacation. But that time together, for those few days that we were together, I felt that love and cooperation and spirit and unity that I picture in my mind as being eternal. That someday we will not only have them, but we'll have the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren and be part of the family spirit. We're promised in the Doctrine and Covenants the same sociality that we have in this life will continue on to the next. It will be the sociality that we'll enjoy in the next. And that is my hope and joy, that we can have those moments that we can say, oh yeah, this will be kind of like it will be then.
memories are forever.
Ta-da.
Says it all.